Cassie Alvarez had no choice but to take the job. Her student loans were choking her, and job rejections kept piling up like unopened bills. When a staffing agency called about an open night shift position at Mason Textile, she didn't hesitate, despite the odd silence on the other end of the line when she asked what happened to the last employee. The factory was located just outside of town, surrounded by thick pine woods and fog that seemed permanent. It was a crumbling, soot-covered building with cracked brick walls and a crooked chimney that leaned like it was ashamed of what it had witnessed. Cassie arrived at 10 p.m. sharp. A frail old man in a maintenance uniform handed her a badge and keycard. "No need to go near the west wing," he muttered without looking at her. "Keep to the main floor. Lock the doors after midnight. And whatever you hear around 3:00." He paused. "Don't go looking." She chuckled nervously, thinking it was a joke. He didn't laugh. Inside, the factory was eerily still. Her footsteps echoed through empty aisles of broken sewing machines and dust-choked looms. The overhead lights flickered, and the air smelled faintly of burnt cloth and something metallic, like rust or blood. Cassie found the control room, a small glass booth elevated above the main floor. There was a desk, an old clock stuck at 3 o'clock, and a dusty mug that read Mason Strong, 1986. She logged in, checked the clipboard left behind, and sighed. Her job was simple. Sit, monitor the place, make sure no vandals or squatters broke in. Midnight passed quietly. She ate a vending machine sandwich, scrolled her phone, and watched a raccoon wander past a broken window. At 2:59 a.m., her eyelids grew heavy, lulled by the hum of silence. Then it began. At exactly 3 a.m., every machine on the floor groaned to life. Cassie bolted upright. Her hands shook as she stared out across the factory. The conveyor belts moved slowly. A loom clacked, a sewing machine buzzed, and far in the distance, red fabric spilled onto the floor, rolling by itself. Her keycard slipped from her hand. Cassie's breath caught in her throat as shadows began to form. Vague human shapes shuffling between the machines, silent and stiff. They moved like they'd never stopped working, like they'd been doing this every night since 1987. As she ducked beneath the glass, heart racing, she saw something even stranger. None of them had faces, just blank skin where eyes, nose, and mouths should have been. And in their arms, they carried rolls of cloth the color of blood. Cassie didn't sleep after that. She stayed curled on the floor of the glass control booth, barely daring to peek over the edge. The faceless workers moved in steady patterns, each step robotic, as though following a memory, not an order. Their limbs jerked unnaturally, like marionettes pulled by invisible strings. And the machines that hadn't worked in over 3 decades, sang a low, mechanical lullaby that echoed off the walls. It was the kind of sound that made your teeth ache and your spine stiffen, an industrial rhythm that didn't belong in the year 2025. Then, just as suddenly as they had started, the machines stopped. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the shadows vanished like smoke in wind. The red fabric stopped unrolling. Silence returned, heavy and absolute. Cassie stayed frozen until the sun cracked through the shattered window panes. Only then did she dare to leave the booth. As she crept down the metal steps onto the factory floor, she saw something that made her stomach twist. A long red thread trailed across the concrete, leading from one of the old looms toward the west wing. She remembered the old maintenance man's warning. No need to go near the west wing, but curiosity is a powerful curse. She followed the thread slowly, noting how it snaked past overturned chairs, broken spindles, and blackened scorch marks on the floor. The hallway to the west wing was blocked by a rusted iron gate and a faded sign. Area condemned, do not enter. The red thread disappeared beneath the gate. Cassie knelt and touched it, warm, slightly sticky. She recoiled, wiping her fingers on her jeans. Her heart pounded. This wasn't just thread. Felt alive. Behind her, something shifted. A soft clink, like metal rolling. She turned around and found one of the sewing machines on the floor had moved. Only a little, just a few inches, but enough to leave drag marks in the dust. Cassie backed away slowly. She didn't know if she imagined it, or if something was pulling the threads around her. The factory had a pulse. She could feel it now, throbbing beneath the floor, humming inside the walls. It wanted her to stay. As she fled to the exit door, she yanked hard on the handle. Locked. Her keycard beeped red. From somewhere deep in the factory, a voice whispered in a breathy, scorched tone. "Stay on shift, Cassie." The sound wasn't human. It wasn't even close. Cassie pressed her back to the cold steel door, heart hammering like a machine gone wild. The whisper still echoed faintly in her ears, even though the factory was dead silent again. "Stay on shift, Cassie." How did it know her name? She slammed her badge against the reader again. Red light. Nothing. No response. No help. Her phone had no signal. No bars. No Wi-Fi. Only a frozen clock screen blinking 3 a.m. Again. But it wasn't 3 o'clock anymore. She was sure of it. Time was broken here. Cassie took a breath. "You're fine," she lied to herself. "You're not trapped. It's just a glitch. Or a prank." But that thread of blood-red fabric she'd seen earlier still wound along the floor, as if guiding her deeper into the factory's gut. And then she heard it again. Click, clack, click, clack. Footsteps. Too many. She ducked behind a stack of crates near the loading dock. Her breath caught as shadows moved just beyond, lurching shapes in dim light. One by one they appeared. Figures in dusty work uniforms, overalls stained with ash and old thread. Their movements were jerky, repetitive, like ghosts stuck in muscle memory. Each one carried a bolt of red fabric, draped across their arms like offerings. But their faces, Cassie had never seen anything more wrong. Where there should have been features, eyes, lips, noses, there was only smooth, pale skin, blank and stretched like wax paper over bone. No mouth to speak, no eyes to see, yet somehow, they looked at her. She could feel their gaze. One of them stopped near her hiding spot. Its head turned slowly, scanning the room with that eyeless face, tilted as if listening. Cassie didn't breathe. The figure bent down, close, inches from her. Then it sniffed the air. She nearly screamed, biting down on her sleeve. The thing lingered, hand tightening around its bolt of fabric, then turned away. Another faceless worker passed behind it, dragging a cart of old spools and scissors that clattered like bones. As they moved on, Cassie noticed something even more disturbing. They weren't walking randomly. They were reenacting something, steps of a production line. Cutting, ditching, rolling, haunting routines carried out like clockwork. But there was no product, no overseer, no reason. They were just working, for no one, for nothing. Cassie crawled slowly out of her hiding place and backed toward the stairwell to the upper level. But as she reached the first step, crack, she stepped on a spool. The noise rang out like a gunshot in the dead air. Every faceless head snapped toward her. They didn't move, but they knew. Cassie ran. She dashed up the stairs 2 at a time, twisting through narrow hallways lined with threadbare uniforms and broken safety signs. Behind her, the shuffle of dozens of shoes followed, slow at first, then faster. As she slammed a door behind her and shoved a filing cabinet in front of it, she looked around. She was in the old office wing now. Empty desks, shattered glass, mice scurrying through moldy papers, and on one wall, a massive, blackened employee photo from 1987. She scanned the faces, rows of smiling workers, name tags, proud posture, but in the back row something stood out. A woman, about her age, wearing the same jacket Cassie had on, same haircut, same birthmark near the eye. It was her, or someone exactly like her, and written in faded ink beneath the photo, Cassandra Alvarez, seamstress, night shift, 1987. Cassie stared at the photograph, paralyzed. Her name, her face, dated 1987. Impossible. She was born in 1999. She had never been here before. She had no family in this town. No connection to Mason Textile, none she was aware of. But the photo told a different story. She reached out, fingertips trembling, and touched the glass. A crack split the image across her face. At that exact moment, a loud metallic bang echoed through the hallway behind her, followed by slow, dragging footsteps. The filing cabinet she had used to block the door was being pushed effortlessly. The faceless workers were coming. Cassie ran again, deeper into the upper levels. The lights flickered violently as if the building itself was waking up. She passed rows of broken lockers, faded safety posters, and a corkboard filled with ancient newspaper clippings. One headline standing out: Tragic fire at Mason Textile, 27 dead in mysterious blaze. Below it, another clipping: Night shift survivor found catatonic. Only words: we burned together. She didn't want to know more, but something inside her pushed her forward. Down a narrow corridor, she found it, the West Wing entrance, or what remained of it. A large steel door, half melted and covered in black ash. The sign above it had fallen, burned, but she could still read the words stamped into the rusted metal. Seamstress floor, do not enter, fire origin site. She shouldn't go in. But the thread, the red one, was back. It had reappeared at her feet and slithered beneath the door like a living vein. It was leading her, or luring her. Cassie pushed the door open. A wave of thick, burned air hit her like a wall. The smell was overwhelming. Charred wood, old smoke, and something fouler underneath, like scorched flesh and melted plastic. Inside, the room was frozen in time. Machines stood half-melted, their metal frames twisted like skeletal remains. The walls were black with soot. Handprints burned into them like shadows caught mid-scream. Some were small, child-sized. In the center of the room sat a single sewing machine, still standing, still intact, still warm. Cassie approached it slowly. Her footsteps crunched over shattered glass and brittle ash. She reached out to touch the machine, but before she could, she heard it, a soft ticking, like a clock inside the walls. Then a whisper, "You never left." Cassie spun around, but no one was there. The room was empty except for her. And the mirrors, she hadn't noticed them at first, cracked and filthy, hanging above the stations like ghosts. But now, as she looked closer, she saw something horrifying. Her reflection was not moving like her. It was still seated at the machine, sewing, endlessly, threading red string through blackened fabric. And then, slowly it looked up and smiled, even though she wasn't smiling. Cassie staggered back. Her heart thundered in her chest. She turned to run, and came face to face with a woman, burned, skin melted, dress singed, hair half missing. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and her lips moved in a rasp. "Finish what you started," Cassie screamed. Everything went black. Cassie awoke to the sound of fluttering paper. She was back in the office wing, lying on the floor, head pounding. How she got there, she didn't know. Her clothes smelled like smoke, and her palms were smudged with ash. The photo on the wall of the 1987 staff had fallen beside her. But something had changed. Where her name had once been printed, Cassandra Alvarez, seamstress, night shift, 1987. The ink had faded into nothing, vanished, as if it had never been there. No, worse, as if she had never been there. Cassie stood, dazed, and stumbled into the nearby supervisor's office, a room she hadn't noticed before. The door creaked open with effort, and inside was the air of a place long undisturbed. Heavy with dust, the windows darkened by grime, every surface blanketed in age. But there was one thing untouched. A single, black-bound ledger sat at the center of the desk, perfectly clean. Cassie hesitated, then opened it. Inside were lists of names, employee check-ins, shift reports, machine logs. Some names were crossed out with red ink. Some pages had been torn. But on the very last page, written in frantic, uneven scrawl, was a series of final entries. All from the same person, Supervising Manager Thomas B. Rourke. The entries read, October 11th, 1987, 3 a.m. They started showing up again, the ones who burned. I saw Louise near the cutting line. No face, No voice, just working. October 12th, 1987, 3 a.m. The machines are moving by themselves now. I shut off the breaker twice. They still ran. Someone's sewing the fabric again. Blood red. Always red. October 13th, 1987, 3 a.m. I tried to leave. The doors won't open. Time won't pass. I thought I escaped, but I woke up back here same night. I think I'm stitched in. October 14th, 1987, 3 a.m. They want me to finish it. I don't know what it is. The symbol, it's wrong. I got the sigil wrong. That's why they burn over and over again. October 15th, 1987, 3 a.m. She's back. The seamstress. The one who stayed after the fire. She keeps sewing the same pattern. Red fabric. Black thread. I can hear her needle in my skull. October 16th, 1987? I stitched myself into the walls. I think it worked. I don't hear them tonight. Maybe this is freedom. Or maybe I'm just a part of the building now. Cassie turned the page. Blank. Then suddenly scratch. A fresh line appeared before her eyes, being written in real time. Her name, Cassie Alvarez, night supervisor, 3 a.m. Cassie dropped the ledger and backed away, heart pounding. A cold wind blew through the room, even though every window was sealed shut. The lights overhead dimmed until the room was cloaked in near darkness. Behind her, something shifted. Slowly, Cassie turned toward the hallway and saw a trail of red thread winding away from the door. It was leading her again. She knew she shouldn't follow, but she also knew there was no other way out. Cassie followed the red thread with slow, hesitant steps. It slithered across the cracked tiles like it knew where to go, leading her through rusted doors, down lightless corridors, and past rooms swallowed by time. Everywhere she walked, the air grew heavier, thicker, like breathing through soaked cloth. She reached a large storage room, its door marked with a half-burned placard. Textile vault, authorized staff only. The thread disappeared beneath the door. Cassie pushed it open. Inside, rows of tall industrial shelving lined the walls, stacked with massive bolts of fabric, untouched for decades. Dust coated everything except a single bolt on a central table. Deep red, gleaming like fresh blood. Cassie stepped closer. The bolt was unrolling by itself. Slowly, purposefully, the fabric moved as if unseen hands were at work, stretching and folding it across the table in perfect precision. She reached out and touched it. Warm, wet. She yanked her hand back, gasping. Her fingertips were stained dark crimson. Blood, not dye, not symbolic. Real blood. The scent hit her then, metallic and thick, filled her lungs, her mouth, and as she stared down at the fabric, she realized something even worse. There were faces in it, pressed faintly beneath the surface of the cloth, like bodies trapped beneath ice, were human impressions. Distorted mouths frozen mid-scream, eyes wide, cheeks stretched and distorted by the weave. She backed away, horrified. The walls began to pulse. A low mechanical humming vibrated through the floor, familiar now. The machines were waking up again. It was 3 a.m. Cassie spun toward the door, but it slammed shut before she could reach it. The red thread wrapped around her ankle like a vine and dragged her back toward the table. She screamed, falling hard. The bolt of cloth surged forward and wrapped around her wrists like a shroud. Then came the footsteps, dozens of them. The faceless workers entered through the walls, literally through them, phasing out of rusted metal and old wood like ghosts stitched into reality. They surrounded her, silent and still. One of them stepped forward, holding a large sewing needle. Not metal, bone. Cassie thrashed, but the fabric held her tight. The worker bent down, eyeless face inches from hers. It tilted its head slowly, almost curiously, as if deciding where to start stitching. But before the needle could pierce her skin, something changed. A loud clang echoed from somewhere above. A blinding white light exploded through the cracks in the ceiling. The thread recoiled. The workers froze like mannequins. The bolt of fabric released her. Cassie scrambled to her feet, gasping, shaking, bleeding from her wrists. She stumbled out the vault door, barely managing to shove it closed behind her. Silence again. The machines went quiet. The thread curled back into the darkness, retreating like a snake. Cassie looked down at her arms. Etched in blood were two words stitched into her skin, crudely, as if sewn by invisible hands. Help US. Cassie barely had time to catch her breath before the factory shifted around her. The heavy metal door behind her creaked open slowly, revealing a narrow hallway bathed in flickering fluorescent light. From the shadows emerged a man, dressed in a neatly pressed 1980s-era manager's uniform. His posture was rigid, his steps deliberate. "Evening, Cassie," he said, voice calm and unsettling. Cassie froze. "How do you know my name?" she whispered. The man smiled, but there was something off. His face was smooth, almost waxen, like a mannequin's. No wrinkles, no blemishes, no eyes glinting with life. Just a pale, featureless mask where his face should have been. "I'm Thomas Griggs," he said, "the last plant manager of Mason Textile. I died in the fire of '87, but duty calls me back." Cassie's skin crawled. "You're dead." He nodded. "Yes, but some of us never truly leave. Not until the work is done." He gestured around the darkened hallway. "This factory is a trap, caught in the moment of its own destruction. The faceless workers? They are the souls stitched into the fabric of this place. They need me to lead them." Cassie swallowed hard. "Why me?" "You share their blood," he said simply. "You are part of the pattern. The seamstress who stayed behind, the thread that never broke." Cassie's mind raced. Was this a hallucination? A ghost? Or worse? Was she losing herself to the curse? Griggs stepped closer. "If you help me finish the fabric, free the souls, the factory will finally rest. But if you fail, you'll join us forever." Behind him, the faceless workers shuffled into formation, carrying their crimson bolts. The sewing machines hummed to life again, lights flickering across the broken floor. Cassie looked down at her wrists, still marked with the blood-stitched words, "Help US." Her fate was clear. She had no choice but to face the midnight shift once more. The factory's walls seemed to breathe as Cassie followed Griggs deeper into the darkened corridors. The hum of machines grew louder, almost deafening, and the air thickened with smoke, even though the fire had long been extinguished. Suddenly, shadows flickered across cracked windows, and a faint glow illuminated the far end of the main floor. Cassie froze. Before her eyes, the past began to replay like a ghostly film. Flames licked the walls. Smoke curled through beams. Screams echoed, faint, desperate, and horrifying. She saw workers running in panic, faceless now but frantic, their arms waving helplessly as the fire swallowed the factory. The sound of creaking beams falling, glass shattering, and fabric burning filled the air. Then she saw herself, or someone who looked exactly like her, among the fleeing crowd. Her reflection of 1987, running with a bolt of crimson cloth clutched tightly under her arm. Cassie's heart shattered. Was she doomed to relive this nightmare again and again? Was she the seamstress who never escaped the fire? Was this curse binding her soul to the factory's fate? Griggs whispered beside her, voice hollow. "This is where it began, and where it never ended." Every night, the fire replays, the fabric weaves itself, and the workers stitch their final tasks. Only one can break the cycle. Cassie watched helplessly as the flames crept closer, the heat burning her skin though she wasn't there. She reached out, trying to scream, to warn the past version of herself, but the smoke swallowed her voice. The fire roared, and the scene faded. Cassie blinked. The factory was silent again, but the weight of the night pressed down harder than ever. She knew what she had to do. The cycle had to end. Cassie stood alone in the dim light of the factory's main floor, her eyes fixed on the crimson fabric spread out before her on a battered wooden table. The blood-red cloth bore an intricate symbol woven in black thread, a symbol she recognized from the ledger and the whispered warnings of the faceless workers. It was a sigil, a pattern designed not just for sewing but for binding souls. Binding time. Cassie's fingers trembled as she traced the lines of the pattern, feeling the thread beneath her skin like a living thing. She understood now this wasn't just fabric. It was a prison. The seamstress, the faceless workers, the fire, all trapped in an endless loop woven into the cloth itself. She remembered Thomas Griggs's desperate words. The sigil was stitched wrong, and that mistake cursed them all. Cassie's breath hitched as she realized the terrible choice before her. If she finished the pattern, completed the stitching, she might finally release the souls, end the curse, and silence the factory forever. But at what cost? Completing the pattern meant becoming part of the fabric, becoming stitched in, prisoner forever. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Behind her, the soft shuffle of faceless footsteps grew louder. The workers were watching, waiting. Cassie clenched her fists. This was the moment of truth. To break the cycle, she would have to take up the needle herself. The factory was silent, but the air vibrated with a heavy, expectant tension. The hum of ancient machines had faded, leaving only the sound of Cassie's steady, uneven breaths. She stood before the large wooden table where the crimson fabric lay spread out like a dark river beneath the flickering fluorescent lights. The sigil, a twisting, haunting pattern of black thread running through the blood-red cloth, pulsed faintly, as if alive. The fabric seemed to ripple beneath her fingers, whispering secrets she couldn't quite hear. Around her, the faceless workers formed a circle. They didn't move, but their presence was suffocating. Their empty faces turned towards her, waiting, patient, unblinking, eternal. Cassie's hands trembled as she picked up the ancient sewing needle, long, curved, and carved from bone. It felt cold in her palm, heavier than any needle she'd ever used. She could feel the weight of every lost soul stitched into the fabric, every scream trapped in the weave. Her own blood stained the thread wrapped around the needle's eye. She glanced toward the rusted exit door. Freedom was just beyond, but locked tight. The factory had already claimed so much of her. Her time, her sanity, her very identity. If she ran now, the cycle would continue. The faceless workers would rise again tomorrow, bound to repeat their endless shift. But if she stayed, if she finished the stitching, she might finally free them. She might finally free herself. Cassie took a deep breath and lowered the needle to the fabric. The moment the needle pierced the cloth, a jolt shot up her arm, sharp and electric, like the factory itself was alive and resisting. The faceless workers stepped closer. Their silence was a chorus of despair and hope. She could almost hear their muted voices whispering in her mind. Finish the work. Break the curse. Stitch the past. Stitch the future. Or be stitched in. Her vision blurred. Time twisted. The lights flickered faster, casting long shadows that danced like flames along the walls. She threaded the needle through the cloth, pulling the black thread tight. Each stitch was a strike against the curse, but also a binding promise. Memories flooded her mind. Faces she'd never seen. Lives cut short by fire and fear. Endless nights trapped in a cycle of death and labor. She saw the original seamstress, burned but unyielding, sewing through smoke and ash, desperate to complete the pattern that could save them all. Cassie's fingers bled as the needle pierced her skin and the fabric. She tasted iron, felt cold sweat drip down her spine, but she kept stitching. The factory shuddered. Suddenly, the faceless workers began to fade, their outlines dissolving into threads of light that lifted away like mist. The machines slowed, their mechanical groans turning to sighs. The oppressive weight in the air lightened. Freedom was near. But then, a voice, cold and commanding, cut through the silence. "Stop!" Cassie froze. From the shadows emerged Thomas Griggs, his featureless face twisted in a mask of rage. "You don't understand," he hissed. "If you finish, you become the new anchor, the new seamstress. The cycle begins again, only with you." Cassie's heart pounded harder than ever. Her arms were shaking, the blood on the needle now mingled with tears. "Then I choose," she said, voice trembling but resolute, "to end this, once and for all." Griggs lunged forward, but before he could reach her, the fabric burst into flames. Not burning, but glowing with a pure white light that spread like wildfire across the floor and walls. Cassie felt herself pulled into the light, weightless and warm. The faceless workers' whispers turned into songs of release and thanks. The fire lifted the factory's curse, unraveling decades of torment thread by thread. And then, silence. Cassie opened her eyes. She was outside Mason Textile, dawn breaking over the horizon. The old factory was nothing but ruins, crumbling into dust. Her wrists were free of thread, her skin clear. The blood stitch was gone. The nightmare was over, or so she hoped. But as she turned to walk away, she felt it. The faintest tug at the corner of her sleeve. A single thread, red as blood. A reminder, the past may be stitched, but it is never truly gone. The end.